That's how they take signals, how they people, etc., etc. And we think it feeds into the idea that women in particular should be subservient to men, should be sacrificing things for family. And we think that especially on the road, especially in society right now, that's extremely bad. And this is extremely, and especially this particular narrative through a children's TV show is extremely pernicious for a few reasons. Firstly, when kids watch it, we the music, the story, makes them emotionally invested in it. It's probably gonna play again in their mind, and it's gonna be something that they remember and they really like because it's something they talk about and the family talk about, etc. It's like a cornerstone memory in mind, and it's when this like forms like a fundamental memory when you're young, it's really hard to push this narrative out of people. And it's firstly that it has tendency to lead to young girls turning to young women and being more likely to sacrifice what they think to do for love or what they perceive as love. Or will perceive as love. And we think this is bad for a few reasons. We think this is bad firstly again because we don't think that that making decisions based on loving or spur of woman, or even like in comparison with all the other multitude of factors in life, like for example like in the real life example, whether you want to like live out your entire life just to be with like some guy you met like, in another city, for example, we think that just that particular decision you need to take into account so many things. For example, whether the job opportunity is there, for example, whether you fit into that area, for example, all this, and we think that this takes precedence over love. Again, because love, like all emotions, have a tendency to be temporal, have a tendency to change, and is not likely to and is unlikely to remain to be something that satisfies you versus all the other factors that go into place at the end of the day. And secondly, the reason why it's particularly harmful is that it's particularly harmful to the larger social narrative or the idea of women, because the idea that women should be sacrificing things, especially women should be sacrificing things for the family while men shouldn't be, is something that's been propagated by the KGP for like a long time. And we think but especially that it's not propagated by these modern movies, and that it propagates this damaging narrative on a whole new generation of people, which is something which is especially important because it's something which we're trying to fight and try to everything, especially when it comes in conflict directly with progressive social movements, that is a harm we should not willing to accept. What was the final comparison? Firstly, even if you get some form of happiness, or that you may get some happiness for small decisions are more likely to be bad, and even if you're more likely to make bad decisions. So on how your bad decisions are more likely to outweigh whatever good thing or whatever good emotions you have. And secondly, just because in the situation that because in this particular situation, outcomes are good doesn't mean in all situations that this line of decision making is bad. The way this debate should be educated is whether this particular action was good or not in this particular situation, but on the whole, whether at the end of the day is this a good choice that should be made under all circumstances. And of those two reasons, we're very proud to propose. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Leader of opposition. GPM.
I think that's one reason why the opposition is going to use this debate. It's because they're extremely uncomparative in their argument. What do I mean by this? That means to say that they have a lot of arguments about pushing of narratives, cultural exchange is something that's good, breaking of barriers is something that's good, developing the undersea kingdom is something that's good. But specifically, the narrative that needs to be debated in this particular debate was why does it need to be done in this way? Which means to say, if we can have, like, pushing out this narrative, assuming it's an a priori good thing in this debate, why does it have to be done in a way where Ariel specifically falls in love with a man, decides to give up her entire life as the undersea princess, like make a decision to give up her voice, walk on nails for like the better part of like I don't know, a couple of days, and at the end of the day, like in the story, doesn't even get the princess at all. What does this mean? This means I think that specifically we give you analysis about how this particular narrative and the fact that it was done in this particular way was something that was extremely negative. I don't think it was fair for them to brush it off by saying that not a lot of people do this kind of thing and they are balancing out factors in this debate. What am I going to do? I'm firstly going to respond to the bunch of material we have from that side. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the stuff that Nick said that I don't think was responded, particularly why it was important in this debate. So, responses. That's how the House firstly claims that people are not going to watch this movie one time and go on and do this kind of thing, right? The second thing is that, okay, if this is true, then the rest of the narrative pushing argument doesn't work because it relies on the exact same factor of people watching it and buying into it and doing that kind of thing. The second thing I'll say is that, the second response, they say, this won't happen because there are education and other balancing narratives to prevent this sort of bad decision making. The question then becomes, what are these other narratives and what are these balancing factors? If you're going to tell me that it's parents, because majority of the biggest audience of Disney shows are children, then I would say that parents are really bad role models and really bad actors in terms of regulating the sort of content that their children view. The reason that it's so easy for children these days to view pornography is because it's available online, and we don't think parents do a good enough job in installing filtering software or preventing the kids from accessing the sort of thing. Either that, or they go the extreme of blocking them out from all technology altogether. So I don't necessarily see how a balancing narrative would work, or even if there exists one, they have yet to substantiate it. Even if it works, right? I would argue that the power of Disney's subliminal messaging is stronger than any other narrative that exists out there. Why? The first analysis is that these are young and impressionable children. The second is that it's an extremely emotional experience that they go through when they're watching this movie. So because they don't have a reference point to know what relationship should look like, to know what true love should look like, because they don't have this maturity, they don't have the life experiences, it's very easy for them to buy into this conception of what love is, and it's not enough for parents to tell them that's not what love looks like, without providing a counterfactual or a counter-narrative to what love actually is. The second thing I would say is that the emotional experience of watching Ariel fall in love with this young Prince Charming, going through the entire process of half killing herself in order to get her one true love, is something that really sticks in the mind of this individual. That means to say, even if you have countervailing narrative, it's highly unlikely that you'll be able to beat the subliminal influence of Disney movies, which means at the end of the day, it's more likely than not that children are going to have this conception of love and bad decision making that they're going to carry into their life at the end of this debate. So I don't think that they provide a moderating influence on this sort of harmful narrative in this particular debate. The second thing they talk about is cultural exchange, right? I don't really understand why this is an argument to start with. The argument is basically she was tired of her life in the ocean and wants to experience life outside, and this is an analogy for moving to England. I don't understand. The first time, even if we accept this argument as value, I don't see why cultural exchange is an a priori good. You can live under the sea for the rest of your life and be a perfectly happy, content individual without ruining your life. I think there's a trade-off we're happy to take on the outside of the house. Secondly, they say, you would encourage people to break out of the boundaries, for instance, gay people. The first response, it is unclear to what extent this has an effect on people that exist within oppressive society structures right now. Because if you want to argue that living in a palace and having a boring life is analogous to the social oppressive structures that exist and the social discrimination against being gay, I don't necessarily think that is true. Because I think I think it's something different. just being the talents and not being able to do what you want to do, and having people actively shame you for who your identity and who you are, and in some cases even beat you up on the street, is extremely, extremely different. The second thing is that The Little Mermaid is just not about gay people, so I don't necessarily, if they make the connection, like I don't really see those people, why those people will make that particular connection. This movie is not about gay people, it's about a horny teenager mermaid, right? Lastly, lack of ideas for development. This is stretching a bit lah. Like, you go out of the ocean in order to get development, but even in the movie, they don't get development. So I'm not sure what this argument has value in this debate. Yes, so I don't think that all provided us like enough material to explain why this was a particularly good narrative for people to have, and I don't think our analysis was responded to sufficiently. I'll take a point if you guys have one. No, all right. I think that in this debate, Nick gives you two pieces of material that were really important that was not engaged with. The first was that this promotes active, bad decision making, i.e., falling for someone, getting so in love with someone, making decisions that change your life for the long term, and just running with it. And given the explanation of the subliminal influencing power of Disney movies, I think it's a very, very harmful narrative that we sell towards children. Just like in the Disney version of The Little Mermaid, she ends up with a happy life with the prince. In the Aesop's Fable, what actually happens was that she kills herself because the prince falls for someone else. I think that at the end of the day, even if the outcomes of a bad decision is something that's good, does not justify you making a bad decision to start with. And I am concerned for the children that watch these movies and think that it's okay for us to make rash decisions for true love, sacrifice everything we have in order to just achieve a temporary pleasure that may or may not even exist. The second argument, I think was the more important argument, was the fact that Disney bought into social narratives right now about true love and about patriarchal norms that taught this woman that it's okay to sacrifice everything you wanted for love. And by the way, this is the exact same narrative that keeps women trapped in abusive relationships. Why? Why don't you leave this guy? If this guy beats you, why don't you leave him? Because I love him and I'm going to sacrifice my life for him or sacrifice things in my life for him. I don't think this is something that's good. And I think that telling these children, telling these young girls from an extremely young age that it's something acceptable is something that's harmful. And this is programming that's very difficult for feminists and other individuals in society to try to overcome. Because it's so ingrained, because it's so deeply rooted in the minds and the psyche of the individual, we think it more likely pushes them towards harmful interpretation of what love is, traps them in a harmful relationship, and prevents them from seeking the self-empowerment that they necessarily need at the end of the day.
Okay. very much. ELO, that's a member of CAF. Just give me 1 minute, yeah, I just need to deal with some stuff. Okay.
We think that in the opening half of this debate, there's been a lot of talk about which side actually forms a better narrative. And we heard from opening that it's going to create a narrative that promotes toxic choices as a woman, and we heard from opposition that people are rational. So what I'm going to do today is that I'm mainly going to break up this dialogue, and I'm going to tell you additional information as to why the narrative that's formed as a result of media and movies, especially coming from a children's company such as Disney, I'm going to tell you why that's exactly so insidious and why it's more likely to form a narrative that people are going to abide by, and how this plays into misogynistic values and its effect on the narrative that it generates. But before I get to my case, just a bit of rebuttals that don't fit in with my arguments. We've heard primarily two things from our opening opposition. Firstly, as to how people are rational, and therefore that means that the narrative that's formed, people won't listen to it. But we don't think that's true, but I'll get to that. But we think there's two reasons why. I'm going to get to my first reason first. Because we think that cognitive dissonance is extremely powerful in determining what films become popular or what narratives are being driven within society. And we think this is something that hasn't been talked about in opening government, and we think this is extremely important. Because we acknowledge that there's a lot of films with a lot of different narratives as what they want to talk about. But we tell you that the ones with a lot of toxic narratives is more likely to be the one that's being promoted, simply because people are more likely to support or buy films that are aligned with what they already believe in. So we think that's why people are more likely to buy or support films with more sexist narratives, with more racist narratives, because it's already something that they're comfortable with. We think people by natural don't want to feel antagonized. And the point at which filmmakers try to be revolutionary and try to bring up some new narrative, we tell you that's extremely difficult for you to do simply because people want to deny it. And we think that's exactly the reason why a lot of the toxic narratives that are generated are a lot more potent than what the good narratives that opening opposition wanted to talk about. The second thing that they want to talk about is that the metaphor of her leaving her kingdom for a man is representative of how you should be able to make the choice to leave and abandon your culture for what you want to do. But we don't think this is necessarily a good narrative that's formed in society, simply because we have to recognize the whole context of the film is that Ariel leaves her kingdom to just to get with a man that barely knows her. What the narrative isn't that they break out the culture to do what they want or do what's best for them. It's simply to sacrifice everything that they have in their life, such as their friends or their families or the culture or the people that want to support them, for what is perceived as true love in society. We think what is perceived as true love in society is extremely suggestive, sure, but we think that the narrative that's formed as a result of The Little Mermaid is one that portrays true love as something that you have to sacrifice something for, as being more true if you sacrifice something for it, and we don't think that is a good thing. So what am I going to tell you in this debate? How do we alienate ourselves from our opening houses? So we think that because they haven't sufficiently dealt with the argument about the rationality of people, we're going to tell you why our side can take this argument and why the effects on culture are so much more insidious than what the opening houses wanted to talk about. Because recognize that in society there's an extremely dominant narrative that's formed as a result of internalized misogyny or internalized racism. And we think that the effects of this are means that the narrative that is formed as a result of this is going to be so much worse, because the problem then becomes exponential because people are more likely to buy into it. We think that the first level analysis here is that because it's marketed towards younger children that don't know what it means to be able to make decisions for themselves, they're more likely to be told that what is perceived as true love is something that you have to sacrifice yourself for. We think that the effect on children especially is that because they are vulnerable and because they believe a lot of the things that they've told, we think that's why they're more likely to buy the narrative, and this is why we think all the outcomes that came out of our opening side, why we should be able to take it instead. But more importantly, what is the unique role of media in affecting culture and the beliefs in society, especially in big film companies like Disney? Because recognize, right, that especially when it comes from a bigger company, that's when it's more likely to be portrayed as something that is considered the norm, that is considered what is like actually what is like true in society. So what The Little Mermaid portrays is that it's a narrative that suggests that for true love to exist, it must be something that you sacrifice for. It must be you must be able to give up what your unique skills are. And when this materializes in society is you have women giving up their job prospects, or people that could have been successful but choose to give up their job because it's considered romantic in society. And because like we think that the underlying narrative that's formed as a result of so many films, so many like decades of telling women that their work is worth less than men, we think overall what the effect is that the reason why this is so important is simply because the narrative becomes so much worse. The problem isn't about a single film being able to do this. We think that the problem is more of having to regret like this toxic narrative coming from such a family like based studio. We think even if it's like more general, we think the narrative is that you have to sacrifice your most unique feature or your most unique strength to be accepted into like a new community, like being able to integrate in a human world. And we don't think that's bad. We think this is bad simply because it's detrimental to your worth, like to your worth, to the worth of your relationship, to the worth of love, and your self-worth and all your skills. We think a lot of that is going to be contingent upon the sacrifices that you make because that's what people perceive as being like important, right? The sacrifices that you make for the people you care about is something that you have to do in order to like tell others that it's something that you really love them. We think this is especially relevant in a large misogynistic world that tells women that the value of their work is way lesser than a man, because setting this narrative is going to be so much harder to break because it's already something that's considered in line with what people believe. And we think that's when the problem of the narratives becomes exponentially worse because there's no one there to combat this. And especially when big film companies don't want to talk about like all these underlying issues, we think that's when they're more likely to entrench all this like misogyny, and where more women are likely to internalize the misogyny that they face on a day-to-day basis, and why they're less likely to want to deal with it in the first place. But why is it so important that we read this film specifically? Because we think that it comes from such a large company. When we allow it to stand as something that is correct, we think that's when it's going to form a normality in society. So what the importance of this is that we have to be able to challenge toxic narratives. We have to be able to regret them and portray them as something that's extremely bad. And we think that to be able to break down narratives, you have to first acknowledge that there's an issue. And we think this is only this can only exist in a world where like films portray like things like Ariel not giving up a voice for a man. So we think in a film where she didn't give up a voice, that's when she's more likely to stay in the sea and be happy with her friends or whatnot. And the narrative that forms as a result of this is that relationships other than true love, other than like familial bonds and platonic bonds, are so much more reliable because you don't have to give it. We think how we alienated ourselves from opening is that a lot of that case cannot stand with the analysis that we provided you today about how society is affected by the culture that we portray in today. And we think we've told you about a lot. We've told you a lot more about the outcomes, and for all these reasons, side by side closing government. I need to rush off something. So
You can go ahead.
Here.
This is okay.
Okay.
The Little Mermaid is not just senseless fiction. Today, in this debate, there has been a lot of blatant mischaracterization of what Ariel truly wants as a person and also what The Little Mermaid is about as a movie. And we have been, the opening half and even to some extent CG has been very concerned about the interpretation of this movie. More specifically, what children will interpret this movie as. But we as CEO will be the first team to tell you that The Little Mermaid is not just a film for children, but it's more importantly, it is a question about who really needs these types of films more, aside from children. It is about grown women and even transgender people, and how this movie is very rooted in these real-life applications, and why these individuals are likely to interpret it correctly as opposed to the blatant mischaracterizations that both CG and OG talked about. Now, before I move on to my stance, a few responses. Today, the main thing we get from the government bench is that the correct message that The Little Mermaid is trying to spread cannot be spread due to the fact that children are likely to misinterpret it due to some factors such as immaturity. And therefore, this message should not be spread through means such as these types of children movies. First of all, we acknowledge that these types of messages are not only for children, but more importantly, with the rise of movements such as #NotMyAriel, that is inspired by the recent recasting of Ariel's role, we acknowledge that there's a greater awareness, not just about the fictional part of this movie and the childish part of this movie, but more about real-life issues such as racism and sexism that I will explain later. So we tell you that most importantly, this movie is not just for children, but for women and also transgender people, as I'll talk about. But secondly, let me tell you why marketing it as a children's movie is important, right? It is because a lot of times this is the best means to spread these types of subliminal messages that government has talked about, right? Because a lot of time, progressive ideas are censored in societies such as the Middle East, where these progressive ideas are therefore unable to reach to different parts of society. And we tell you that it's important to market it as a children's movie so that it does not get censored. But before I move on to my arguments, I'll take OG.
Okay, look, Ariel's decision to go after a man disappointed her father and made her father very angry. Don't you think disappointing your parents is a bad thing?
Right. This is what I'm exactly about to get to. So, what is the main comparison between CO and other teams, right? Today, a lot of all the teams talk about this role that Ariel has to fulfill as a princess, right? That they cannot disappoint their father. We will tell you this is exactly why Ariel needs to give up her voice, because this helps her fight the patriarchy that exists under the sea, and it's also a feminist move, and how it's about Ariel being true to herself. This is my argument, and this argument also directly engages with CG's argument on how women are likely to have less self-worth and less skills, and how this is detrimental to women. But we tell you there's a bigger issue at hand to solve, which is the structural inequality that is so apparent in The Little Mermaid's world. First of all, let's talk about how Ariel liberates herself through from patriarchy by giving up her voice, right? So we acknowledge that Ariel's father is a patriarchal person, right? Ariel's father wants to control her and always tell her what's best for her, right? To the extent where Ariel is forced to sing with her sisters and always perform and market herself as nothing but a good singer and selling her voice as what is only valuable of herself. And that is not what Ariel wants truly, as she so woefully expresses in the lyrics in Part of Your World, where she tells us that she wants to walk and run and stay all day in the sun, right? We tell you that the trade-off between the voice, Ariel's voice to get legs is a worthy trade-off, because firstly, these legs that Ariel gets are a symbol of freedom, right? She's now allowed to travel to places where daughters are not reprimanded by their fathers, as she has also said in the song. So these lyrics literally, obviously imply that there is a deeper meaning than the love that what government bench is trying to talk about, but more importantly, about the patriarchy that Ariel so desperately wants to get out of. Second thing I want to talk about, it's not just about patriarchy, it's the fact that Ariel wants to do human things. What are some examples, right? In the song Part of Your World, she tells us that she wants to know why and how fire burns, right? This means that she's curious about human life and how she's curious about a lot of things in general, and she also throughout the movie goes to shipwrecks to explore different things, right? This in the real world can be a form of women trying to pursue intellect away from the patriarchal system, right? But all of this was impossible because she was confined to an oppressive role that was defined by her voice and her voice alone, and she could only sell herself as a good singer. Third thing I want to talk about, how this is an extremely feminist move and how Ariel is able to take control of her identity and be true to herself. So as I said, men used to value Ariel for her voice, and she let that define her, right? But this was really bad, because in the real life, what does this look like? This looks like women being perceived as nothing but baby-making machines and sex toys because they're wearing revealing clothes. It is also about women being defined as tomboy, for example, because they wear unconventionally feminine clothes and they have shorter hair, right? Like, for example, artists like Billie Eilish, right? So this is all the conventions that women have let men define them by, which has really oppressed these women, right? And Ariel used to do that also, but after she gave up her voice, she turned it around. Because why? Why is this so symbolic? Because Ariel was willing to give up her voice, which was the only thing that Eric and other men in her life could recognize her for. Because she wanted people not to recognize herself
as a voice or a good singer, but to recognize her authentic self and personality, the things that she truly wanted. For example, pursuing intellect. For example, being experiencing the human life, right? And she was able to get that successfully because the outcome of all of this is that the prince ultimately ends up with her, not because she has a good voice, but because she has a good personality. And this is even more obvious when Ursula initially hypnotized Prince Eric due to her voice and her look, the stolen voice that Ursula got from Ariel. And when her true self, her true personality was shown and exposed, that she was cruel to animals, that she was cruel to the palace staff. Her looks couldn't even save her at that point. And Ariel managed to successfully win over the prince's heart because she was true to herself. What is the impact of all of this, right? We believe that this gives women hope and inspires them to think that it's okay to give up everything because you want to pursue what you truly want. And it's not just about love, it's also about things like intellect and personal freedom. And this creates a socially acceptable environment that normalizes the non-conventional female role in society, changes the perception of women. For example, in the Middle East, women literally cannot leave their houses without their husbands, fathers, or any male relatives. And the only way to fight this type of patriarchy, as our side has already told, is by these women having this empowerment and knowing that they don't have to let society define themselves, define them by these men's standards. And we're willing to celebrate women like Ariel who are not afraid to throw away what men find attractive about her, so that she no longer has to be defined by men's standards. Because ultimately, Ariel silences herself, but she's able to make a louder statement. Proud to propose. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
All right, let's have Gov wave. Here.
I think often we can see it oftentimes in this debate. You can see it as multiple narratives that each house wants to fight for. Right? Things like, for example, transgender people somehow being able through this movie will be motivated to go out of their comfort zones or against patriarchy and all these sort of things. I think we can agree to some extent that whatever these people want to perceive what the movie is about, but I think it boils down to two things that's really important. Number one, the internalized racism that exists in this movie itself and how it affects the entire people who are affected by it, and also secondly, for the patriarchy or the misogynistic views that this movie perpetuates. I think under these sort of circumstances, it's really bad for opposition to say that, oh, just because of all these things, because of love, true love, you sacrifice everything that you want. I think that's not a good choice to begin with. But with that, a few things that we need to talk about, right? Number one, the issue that we need to see in this debate. Number one, how this narrative is supposed to be perceived, and secondly, about which comes in as Marcus's point of why it's really important is for the fact that media and movies, and especially as Disney being a really big and influential company, it's also where they drive social norms into place. I think that's really important. That has not been engaged by any of the houses. We gave CG a chance, but CO a chance, but they never really talked about it. But with that, we'll go towards the rebuttals that we see in this debate that don't fit in my speech, right? So we'll go towards the opening opposition first. They wanted to talk about how number one, humanity, right? That means that it encourages people to go towards humanity, to have go to wider societies and come out of your comfort zone. But recognize that Ariel had to suffer in order to go towards these sort of places. And in the end, the prince doesn't even give a damn or even recognizes her in the first place, right? And secondly, recognize that recognize that because it's a child movie, it's more likely that Disney makes sure that every single movie has a good ending. Under these sort of circumstances, the reality of this story itself is for the fact that it wasn't really it wasn't really a good ending. But because Disney had this plot armor, or because they wanted to be more applicable to its children, they make sure they got the good ending that they wanted to talk about. Yeah. So and secondly, right, which goes on towards the closing opposition, right? They want to talk about how there's like patriarchy and how like when you can fight for these sort of things, you'll be able. It's like very motivational towards the women. But the next thing that I wanted to talk about, right, is that firstly, how does it like perceive? How is it perceived towards like people in general, right? Because like perceived in, people in general, right? Because when you see Ariel wearing nothing except for like corals for boobs, I think. Yeah, corals for boobs. Like that literally just plays those misogynistic views and all these sort of things. And recognize that the new Little Mermaid movie stars like a different like I think it's a black or like a other ethnicity person that's playing as Little Mermaid. I think that's really important to recognize that. Why? Because number one, Disney recognizes the mistakes that they have done from the past. This means that they have been internalizing racism and all these sort of things. Because Ariel in the past was a white girl and the prince was a white boy. So under these sort of circumstances, you like the very fact in which Disney sees that, oh, today we're more progressive, we need to take this progressive card in order to make sure that we get more money and get more views, is for the fact that these people just put in stuff just because they want to get the buck, right? They want to get the money. Under these sort of circumstances, it's really weird for closing opposition to come to say that, yeah, sure, even the father is seen as patriarchal, but I don't think it's true, right? Because the parents themselves, or even their friends, like actively warn her not to make these sort of rash decisions, right? And Ariel still chooses to rebel, right? Chooses not to go against the permissions of her father, and go find her like true love. And that's really important because it goes on hand in hand with the argument that Marcus, the extension that wasn't contended with in this debate. But for that, sure.
Under your side of the house, Ariel does not have bodily autonomy. So in the real life application of this situation, is CG also okay with transgender people not being able to transition and modify their sexual organs to become a gender that they prefer?
I think under these sort of circumstances, right, the nuance or like the decisions that people make, right, in general, there's that like because Ariel has rashly or recklessly made the decisions by herself rather than getting public opinion or no, not public opinion, like this opinion for other people themselves. It's really bad because firstly, you don't make the right or best choice possible, right? Or like secondly, like Disney actively tells like the people who are watching, it's for the fact that don't trust society, just believe in yourself. And I think that sure, in some form that is good, but for the fact that in which that if you're like a teenager, for example, who are like or who are vulnerable, even young people in general, like it doesn't have to relate to like relationships, but of course that's premise towards children and all these sort of things. But it's just in general the decisions that you make in life, like going towards gender reassignment surgery. Under these sort of circumstances, you have to make, you know that you need to sacrifice a lot in order to like have these surgeries, right? And I think it's better to get like the opinions of other people before deciding what you want to do. Opposition chooses to recklessly ignore the entire opinion of what people want, and this because of their emotions, because they want to try true love, because they want to go out to their comfort zones, like without their opinion of other people. It's for the fact in which that you can't like in which you make the reckless decisions that are something that's really bad. But with that, we'll go towards the issues that we need to see in today's debate. Number one, about media and movies. Recognize as Marcus wanted to talk about, which hasn't been contended with closing opposition, was the fact that the media is really important because like Disney itself perpetuate social norms. This means that at that time when Ariel was white, when internalized racism was still a thing, it's also where Disney also feeds into the narrative towards these sort of things, right? Like misogynistic views, all these sort of things. I think under these sort of circumstances, Disney does that because Marcus told you that these people, like this Disney people, just want to put these sort of things out there because it's like people just like watching that kind of stuff. Right? But I think under these sort of circumstances, the point in which that you agree to let these people see or make these like active choices of like sacrificing everything for true love that plays into the patriarchal sort of sense, right? It's also where the problem in which that it becomes a social norm, and that's really problematic. Because Marcus told you that the comparison on the side today is that number one, that Ariel makes reckless choices and therefore she sacrifices everything in order to find the true love, but ends up failing. And in sort of circumstances, internalized racism and internalized misogyny is becoming a social norm, and therefore it's really problematic. Closing opposition.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. Let's have Aubrey.
You're here.
Joshua, what are you doing? Playing what? What game you playing? What game you playing? What game you playing? Is this your laptop? I forgot to take Hassan's laptop from the hall. Will be open, right? You all bought the mic, no? Huh? Who's your mic? Where do you do? You do karaoke sessions, they say karaoke.
Music for us.
You use a big guy to spell. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Big voice.
Who you threatening with the mic? It's a voice modulator.
I think that Gov today, right, they take everything too literally, like they're literally focusing on the visuals of the movie and nothing else. However, fairy tales don't exist to tell you that dragons exist, they exist to tell you that dragons can be slayed. So we think that first to address the main clash on interpretation in the opposing half. So we think that we say that we take you at our worst. We say that even if toxic narratives are accepted by most laymen, we can still win on this argument. So first, on the first step of analysis, let's talk about like the stakeholders we want to reach. Okay, we want to reach like the furthest reaching kind of people. So these people are like, for example, maybe people living in countries with censored media, people in the Middle East, for example, because like we want to help the oppressed women there. So we say that the reason why it's so good that it's a children's film is because it won't be censored. So like you cannot. We think that the government's approach to passing these messages along is very unelegant and it's very ineffective because like if you are so obvious with it when you are making these kinds of socially unacceptable statements inside countries that don't allow it, it's going to be censored and you won't even reach those people at all. So children's film is the kind of film that is going to be able to help these people. So even let's say when it gets to that country, even if only smart people in that country understand this film, we say that this is good also because these smart people are the people who are likely going to have more intellectual and higher up careers that will be more directly linked with policy making. So politicians, writers, what have you. These are the people, as long as we can get these people to be more aware of these values, they can actually make these policies and actually educate other people in their country to help make these changes. So we feel like on our side, this is significant enough and our side is able to do this while their side is not able to pass any message at all. So that's our response towards the clash on interpretation. So next, we say that they have also blatantly mischaracterized why Ariel wants to be a human. So the main clashes on the both sides today is that which character tackles the social issues best, social issues of feminism and bodily autonomy. And next, the clash of which side gives an Ariel who is a better version of how women should act. So firstly, we say that my Kingston has already talked about how Ariel fights patriarchy, and on the government's world, they say that women should not disappoint their parents, which means that in other words, they want girls to be subservient to their fathers. They're literally advocating for this very misogynistic statement. So in The Little Mermaid, Ariel literally wants to be part of a world where fathers don't reprimand their daughters. So there's also a high amount of emotional maturity to this, and we do not understand why the government thinks Ariel is a very naive child. So next, Ariel's entire soliloquy it's not even about Eric. Most of it is about fighting patriarchy, being more true to her identity, and about bodily autonomy. So she wants to be. They say that women should fill in the roles that men sets for them. However, we think that Ariel advocates for being more true to her identity, and we support this very much. She wants to have legs. She wants to have feet. She wants to bathe in the sun. She's never wanted to be a mermaid. And just to recharacterize this for you again, even before she met Eric, she was known to sneak off the shipwrecks to salvage human inventions, as Kingston had said. She would sneak away to the surface to stop human beings on the ship. So in fact, her identity was the very thing that brought her to to Prince Eric and not the other way around. So she saw Eric because she was always watching humans. She didn't see Eric. She didn't see Eric and then decide to want to be more human. She saw Eric because she's always wanted to be more human. So we don't think that who she is defined by Prince Eric as the government has mistakenly characterized. So we advocate for this kind of making personal decisions based on who you are and not based on who you have a crush on. So next, the issue of bodily and autonomy is the one that's most blatantly vandalized, we feel. They seem to be against women filling their steps with pain just for love. They seem to be against women taking away a part of themselves. But we think that this is analogous to people with to transgender people who want to undergo sexual reassignment surgery. So we disagree with the government because we think that it's not just about getting other people's opinions, because that is letting people define who you are. We think that even if every step you walk feels like walking on nails, as long as you want to live in a body that feels more like this is okay. Because, for example, transgender people, do you not think that after they undergo SRS, every step they take is walking on nails? Do you not think that after they undergo SRS, they are more like imbalanced and they are more like unhealthy? But however, they're willing to go through this because they want to be in a body that belongs to them. They don't want to be in a body that's defined by the society around them, that doesn't feel correct. They want public opinion. They seem to put a lot of weight on public opinion, and we think that this is very misogynistic, and this is also against the social progression that we are getting to. This is also very oppressive to people like transgender people who want to change something that is so-called innate nature in order to be more themselves. We say that this is socially acceptable, and in the government's world they say it's socially unacceptable, and we think that's regressive.
Before that takes closing, ma'am?
Finally, Ariel actually wants to pursue intellect and knowledge. Like in her exact lyric, again, she wants to know how a fire burns, and she's always wanting to learn about the human world. So how is this analogous to another real world situation? Think girls who want to be medics, girls who want to be politicians or business persons. So girls who throw away what makes them girly, or girls who reject domestic duties in order to pursue knowledge, knowledge and academic achievement. So government side seems to be against this. They seem to think that girls should again be subservient to their fathers when they, instead of pursuing what they really want. And we do not regret Ariel throwing away her voice to become human, because she does so for these very reasons. Finally, to address the issue on which side is more feminist and which side is less misogynistic, we actually think that our world is less misogynistic because the final reason why we think Ariel does not throw away her voice just for men is because she threw away the very thing that Eric identifies her with. She threw away the only thing that made her attractive to Eric. So if she's so intent on pursuing and getting on with Eric, she wouldn't throw away her voice, because when she saved him, it was the only thing he remembered about her. When she threw her voice away, she essentially had to start over, which means that being human wasn't just about being with Eric and all. So she also, this is symbolic, as in she also threw away the defining feature that makes her attractive to men. Her father thinks her singing is good. She threw that away. She threw her voice away. So Eric only recognizes her by her voice. She threw that away. So it's overwhelming evidence that Ariel wasn't becoming human just to be with Eric. So what is this? She threw away her voice, and maybe that's on the surface seen as a woman throwing away literally throwing away her voice, not voicing her opinions, but like Kingston said, she silences herself in order to make the loudest statement of all, and we are very, very proud to oppose because of this.
Thank you very much for the debate. We will see you tomorrow.